The data which is provided in this video is old but still relevant.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our ongoing series. In today's episode, we'll be exploring further the acts of violence perpetrated by Jewish forces against the Palestinian population, some of which were previously mentioned in our earlier video. The massacre at Kibbutz in year 1953, 96 dead. The 101 unit that killed 96 civilians, majority of who were women and children, was led by Ariel Sharon, another future Prime Minister of Israel. He later said, "The order was utterly clear. Kibbutz was to be an example to everyone." Ralph Gorman, the editor of the famous Catholic journal The Sign, explained his thoughts as follows. Terror was a political weapon of the Nazis, but the Nazis never used terror in a more cold-blooded and wanton manner than the Israelis in the massacre at Kibbutz. Kfar Qasim massacre, year 1956, 49 dead. In 29th October 1956, 49 innocent civilians, men, women and children, were brutally murdered. Khan Yunis massacre, year 1956, 275 dead. The Israeli soldiers who attacked the refugee camp in Khan Yunis murdered 275 people. UN officials who conducted an on-site investigation discovered that victims who had been shot in the back of the head had their hands tied. The massacre in Gaza City, year 1956, 60 dead. In this attack, Israelis killed 60 people, including women and children. Fakhani massacre, year 1981. As a result of Israeli air attack on this Lebanese region, 150 people died and 600 were wounded. Sabra and Shatila massacre, year 1982, 2,000 plus dead. Israel's attack on refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila during the invasion of Lebanon in 1982 will go down in history as one of the worst acts of Israeli genocide ever committed. During the attack, more than 2,000 people, mostly women and children, were murdered. Subsequent research and investigation showed that Ariel Sharon, at that time Israel's defense minister, was responsible for the operation. Due to this attack, he is still known as the Butcher of Sabra and Shatila. Journalist and Middle East expert Robert Fisk reported on the horrifying scenes he saw immediately after the attack, in an article written after Sharon was elected Prime Minister. For everyone who stood in the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps in Beirut on 18 September 1982, his Ariel Sharon name is synonymous with butchery. With bloated corpses and disemboweled women and dead babies, with rape and pillage and murder, just up the lane, I came across two women sitting upright with their brains blown out, next to a cooking pot. One of the women appeared to have had her stomach slit open. A few meters away, I discovered the first babies, scattered across the road like rubbish. Then there was this pretty girl, her head surrounded by a halo of clothes pegs, her blood still running from a hole in her back. Most of the murdered women had been raped. Pregnant women had been sliced upon so that their babies could be ripped out. Children barely 3 or 4 years old had been murdered in front of their parents. A news report about the massacres appeared in the French Le Monde newspaper on February 13, 2001. Nihad Hamad, a survivor, describes what happened. A woman's screams pierced the silence. Her hair was tangled mess, her tattered clothes covered in blood. She had the manner of someone who had lost her mind. At her feet were children whose throats had been slit. After they finished their work at the camps, they finished their dirty work at the Gaza hospital. They dragged the doctors, nurses and wounded out of the hospital and killed them. We learned that between 3,000 and 3,500 people had been killed. The Ibrahimi Mosque massacre, year 1994, 29 dead. On 25 February 1994, one of the settlers from Kiryat Arba, Baruch Goldstein, born and raised in Brooklyn, as is the case with a sizable proportion of the settlers in Hebron and elsewhere in the West Bank, stormed into the Ibrahimi Mosque during prayers. He opened fire on the worshippers with his assault rifle, which most settlers carry with them at all times. He killed 29 Palestinians and wounded dozens of others before unarmed Palestinians managed to overcome him and beat him to death. Ever since the massacre, Goldstein has been something of a saint. Here lies the saint, Dr. Baruch Keppel Goldstein. His tombstone in Kiryat Arba reads, "Blessed be the memory of this righteous and holy man. may the Lord avenge his blood, who devoted his soul to the Jews, Jewish religion, Jewish land. His hands are innocent, and his heart is pure. He was killed as a martyr of God on the 14th of Adar Purim, in the year 5754. Jharkhand massacre, year 1996, 109 dead. More than 100 people lost their lives in the Kana refugee camp when it was bombed by the Israeli Air Force. A UN inspection team determined that the massacre was deliberate. The Jenin refugee camp raid massacre, year 2002, 52 dead. What was referred to as the second massacre of Sabra and Shatila was the raid against the Jenin refugee camp. This refugee camp has been set up for Palestinians driven off their land in 1948. Justine Higler of The Independent severely criticizes the world's turning a blind eye to this overt massacre in his article, The Camp That Became a Slaughterhouse. He writes, "For 9 days, Jenin camp, spread over a square kilometer and home for 15,000 Palestinians, was the target of the Israeli helicopters and tanks that rained down rockets and shells into the camp. The wounded were left to die. The Israeli army refused to allow ambulances in to treat them, which is a war crime under the Geneva Convention. The Red Cross has publicly said, people have died because Israel blocked the ambulances. The Israeli authorities may be able to hide the evidence, but they cannot silence the stories that have been pouring out of those who managed to escape the carnage in the camp." Munir Washashi bled to death over several hours after a helicopter round came through the wall of his home. When an ambulance came for him, Israeli soldiers shot at it. Munir's mother, Mariam, ran into the street screaming for help for her son and was shot in the head by Israeli soldiers. While speaking to the Israeli Knesset, the then Foreign Minister Shimon Peres admitted that the Israeli army had committed a massacre. "When the world sees the picture of what we have done there, it will do us immense damage. There is no justification for causing such great destruction." When the United Nations assembled a high-level team to investigate the charges of war crime in Jenin, the Israelis at first stalled it. Then they refused to cooperate. Then they refused access to the UN team altogether. The United States threatened to use its veto, as always. Kofi Annan disbanded the team, and that was end of that. Another shocking display of unparalleled barbarianism was witnessed by a journalist on assignment in Khan Yunis, Gaza, in 2001. The New York Times reporter Chris Hedges witnessed Israeli soldiers not just firing at Palestinian demonstrators, but actually taunting Palestinian children and then killing them as they got within firing range. It is still. The camp waits as if holding its breath. And then out of dry furnace air, disembodied voice booms in Arabic. "Where are all the dogs of Khan Yunis? Come, come!" I stand up. I walk outside the hut. The invective continues to spew, "Son of a son of your mother's." Provoked, the boys dart in small packs up the sloping dunes to the electric fence that separates the camp from the Jewish settlement. They lob rocks toward 2 armored jeeps parked on top of the dune and mounted with loudspeakers. 3 ambulances line the road below the dunes in anticipation of what is to come. A percussion grenade explodes. The boys, most no more than 10 or 11 years old, scatter running clumsily across the heavy sand. They descend out of sight behind a sandbank in front of me. There are no sound of gunfire. The soldiers shoot with silencers. The bullets from the M16 rifles tumble end over end through the children's slight bodies. Later in hospital, I will see the destruction. The stomach ripped out, the gaping holes in limbs and torsos. Yesterday at this spot, the Israelis shot 8 young men, 6 of whom were under the age of 18. One was 12. This afternoon they kill an 11-year-old boy, Ali Murad, and seriously wound 4 more. Children have been shot in other conflicts I have covered. Death squads gunned them down in El Salvador and Guatemala. Mother and infants lined up and massacred in Algeria. Hand Serb snipers put children in their sights and watched them crumble onto the pavement in Sarajevo. But I have never before watched soldiers entice children like a mice into a trap and murder them for sport. The cruelty and brutality described here has occurred continuously on Palestinian soil for the past 78 years. Moreover, the incidents cited above are merely those massacres, acts of brutality, during which many Palestinians lost their lives in a single day. Beyond these, several people have been killed or maimed every day for years. And everyday houses are still destroyed. Olive and date orchards are uprooted. Sometimes they take away the whole trees with roots to plant it in area of their choice. Agriculture land. The means of livelihood are taken over, thus forcing them to become laborers. The few small farms that the Palestinians still own are subjected to frequent attacks by settlers, who burn and cut down all the trees they can find. Clearly, Israel's ultimate goal is to intimidate the Palestinians, drive them off their land and bend them to their will through a systematic policy of ethnic cleansing. The WFP, the UNO World Food Programme Agency, filed an official complaint against the Israeli army for its deliberate destruction of more than 500 tons of food aid donated by the European Commission. This food, stored in Gaza, was meant to be distributed to 42,000 needy people. On 3rd December 2002, soldiers surrounded the building with armored vehicles, put down sticks of dynamite and, despite the protests of the people in charge, who asked to be allowed to remove the food first, blew it up. During the operation, 2 Palestinian civilians who tried to intervene were killed and 20 injured. These are not isolated or accidental acts. On 30th January 2003, 2 tanks and 2 bulldozers razed the Al-Manara food market in Hebron, a city under curfew in which a large proportion of the population are going hungry. To understand what is going on in Palestine, one has to have waited for hours behind a checkpoint, in the scorching heat, amid lorries of rotting vegetables and stalled ambulances, listening to mothers pleading with implacable, sometimes mocking soldiers to let their sick child through. One has to have seen the father turning away to weep for his 8-year-old son, killed while running after an escaped chicken, or the little boy paralyzed in a hospital bed, explaining that he was on his way back from school when 3 soldiers shot him for fun. The entire world looks on as this community is murdered, as it is subjected to blatant genocide. For some reason, most governments have and continue to ignore these brutal and inhuman practices and apply no sanctions, as they do very often against those states that does not suit or fulfill their vested interest, other than the occasional condemnation. We've reached the end of today's episode. Keep an eye out for our next installment coming your way soon. Until then, take care and goodbye.